Hell of a Mouth, Episode 3. Today we're talking about the absolute worst villain in Buffy the Vampire Slayer according to BuzzFeed.com, and we're also going to talk quickly about the most underused villain in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So let's jump in. So according to BuzzFeed.com, the absolute worst villain across all 7 seasons of Buffy the Vampire Slayer was the Anointed One from Season 1 and 2. And it's no great surprise because I probably would have had the Anointed One in the top few worst villains myself, and I think a lot of Buffy the Vampire Slayer fans probably would. But to go back to BuzzFeed for just a second, firstly, I never thought I'd agree with anything in a BuzzFeed article, but I do agree with this. They described the Anointed One as barely a villain at all, which is a perfect description for the character. The Anointed One demanded all this respect from the Order of Aurelius, both before and post the Master's reign of the Order, but he had no feats. We never saw the Anointed One do anything except for sit there and have really poorly overdubbed vocals. At least let the actor talk. That just goes to how unintimidating the character was, because in the end, he was quite likable. Why? Why was he likable? He wasn't actually a big bad at all. He was more of a big sad. Instead of calling him the Anointed One, I think pretty much across the board we're all thinking the Anointed Nun. When the Master left him a legion of disciples, he was probably thinking that he was going to lock the Slayer in a cage, not get burnt up in one. Thank the gods that Spike put us out of our misery with that particular character. And just on the subject, Spike put more effort into putting out a smoke than he did the Anointed One. Why? Such a wasted bad guy and a pointless 6-episode arc. And this brings us to my next point and the next article for today. The most wasted or underused villains in the Buffy universe, because I would say giving 6 episodes to the Anointed One was the most overused villain, given how little impact the character actually had on the story beyond the end of the Master's reign. Those few episodes at the start of Season 2 were beyond pointless. So this is an article from whatculture.com, and it's around the most underused villains in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And What Culture had the character of Sunday at number 1. And I can't help but think, having her at number 1, perhaps they were a little influenced by some revisionist history around the character of Sunday, because things have come out since about the original scripting for that character, the character design, the history of the character, which we'll go into in a future episode. It's truly fascinating. All the things that Sunday could have been if it had have rolled out the way that the character was originally designed. So I think having her at number 1 was maybe more speculation over what she could have been, more so than taking the character that we were presented with actually in the show and extrapolating that into future episodes. And that's why I feel the most underused big bad or potential big bad in Buffy the Vampire Slayer was from Season 3, and it was the character Kakistos. This is one of the most ancient vampires we experience on Buffy the Vampire Slayer outside of the Master. He has a legion of disciples himself. He revels and lives for bloodshed, and as we come to find out, instilled this incredible level of fear and dread into Faith's character. And that episode, as an introduction to Faith, just showed how incredible Eliza Dushku was from the drop. But I just think no other ancient vampire or ancient evil was so easily swept aside in Buffy the Vampire Slayer than Kakistos. It was a very short-lived battle at the end, even a 2-parter. Let's think about other vampires that were portrayed as being very powerful, say Luke from the first 2 episodes of the show. He put up much more of a fight just in general and showed his power level and his threat level far more than Kakistos got to on screen. And just the way both characters were portrayed and talked about, Kakistos exists in a whole different level of threat, a different tier of bad guys than a character like Luke. So I believe Kakistos could have been a great mini arc bad guy that ran across several episodes and allowed the will they, won't they be a team? How powerful can Faith and Buffy be together versus this bad guy that's here right now while all the things with the mayor and Richard Wilkins are happening in the background still. So essentially we got Trick when we could have had Kakistos. Or we could have had both. That would have been cool because I actually personally thought Trick was a pretty interesting and fun character. So I would love to know, who do you think the most underused villain was in Buffy, or maybe just the most underused character in the whole show across 7 seasons? You can comment where you're listening to this. You can DM me on Instagram at hellovamouthpodcast, or you can send an email to josh@jcaldigital.org. That's josh@jcaldigital.org. Righto, guys. It's awesome to talk to you again. I can't wait to speak to you again soon. Keep watching Buffy. Keep the Buffyverse alive. And bye for now.